Aurora stood alone in the medical wing of the human colony on New Haven. The walls around her were white and sterile, lined with machines that beeped softly in the darkness of the night cycle. Her silver hair fell across her shoulders as she looked down at the small human child lying unconscious on the bed. The girl was no more than 8 years old, with freckles across her nose and light brown hair spread against the pillow. Her name was Lucy, and she had been caught in the crossfire during the Kardish attack. The human doctors had done everything they could. They had stopped the bleeding, set the broken bones, and treated the burns that covered half of her small body, but there was nothing more they could do. Lucy would not wake up. The doctors said her mind had shut down from the trauma and pain. They spoke in hushed voices about permanent damage and the possibility that she might never wake at all. Aurora knelt beside the bed and took the child's tiny hand in her own. Her pointed ears drooped slightly as she felt the weakness in Lucy's grip. Even unconscious, the girl's body was fighting to survive. This was the thing about humans that Aurora loved most. They did not give up. They did not accept defeat even when defeat seemed inevitable. They fought for life with a determination that most other species in the galaxy had lost long ago. Ember appeared at the doorway of the medical room. The dragon's scales caught the artificial light and reflected it back in waves of red and gold. The creature was so large that she had to crouch to fit through the doorway. Her intelligent eyes focused on Aurora and the child, and she made a soft sound in her throat that was almost like a purr. "Come here, my friend," Aurora whispered to the dragon. "I need your help." Ember moved forward silently despite her enormous size. She had learned to move carefully around the fragile human structures. The dragon lowered her massive head until it was close to Lucy's body. Steam rose from her nostrils, carrying with it the faint smell of minerals and ancient stone. Aurora placed her hand on Ember's neck and closed her eyes. She began to chant in the old language of her people, words that had not been spoken in hundreds of years. The language was not meant for human ears or human mouths. It was the language of magic itself, the tongue of creation and power. As she spoke, golden light began to flow from her body into the dragon. Ember's scales brightened, becoming more vibrant and alive. The light spread from Ember's body into Lucy's form. It surrounded the child like a warm blanket, seeping into her wounds and broken places. Aurora could feel the magic at work, mending tissue and bone, healing what had been torn apart by the violence of war. But more than physical healing, Aurora was sending something deeper. She was sending hope. She was sending the will to live, the determination to overcome, the strength that all living things possessed but often forgot how to access. Lucy's eyes fluttered. Her fingers twitched in Aurora's hand. The golden light faded slowly, returning to its normal state. Aurora opened her eyes and looked down at the child. Lucy's breathing had changed. It was deeper now, fuller, the breathing of someone who was truly alive and truly present in the world. The human doctors rushed into the room moments later, their instruments indicating that something remarkable had happened. They surrounded Lucy with wonder in their eyes. Her vital signs had stabilized. The brain damage they had feared seemed to have reversed itself. Most incredibly, Lucy's eyes had opened and she was looking around the room with clear awareness. One of the doctors, a woman named Margaret, turned to Aurora with tears streaming down her face. "How did you do that? What did you do?" Aurora stood and walked to the window, looking out at the alien sky of New Haven. The dual suns were rising on the horizon, casting everything in shades of orange and purple. She smiled softly. "I gave her what she needed to heal herself," Aurora said. "Humans have the ability to recover from almost anything, if they remember to believe in their own strength. I simply reminded her body and mind that giving up was not her nature." Over the next few weeks, Aurora remained on New Haven. She did not return to her ship. Instead, she moved into the colony and began to teach the humans about magic and the older ways of the galaxy. Claire, the colony leader, became her closest friend and confidant. They spent hours together discussing philosophy, history, and the future of human civilization among the stars. But not everyone welcomed Aurora with open arms. There was a man named Patrick who worked in the colony's defense sector. He had been a soldier before the colony was established, and he carried the suspicion that came from years of conflict. He watched Aurora constantly, questioning her motives and wondering why an ancient alien power would suddenly take interest in protecting fragile humans. One evening, Patrick confronted Aurora in the central plaza of the colony. The human settlers gathered around, curious about what he might say. Patrick was respected for his tactical mind and his devotion to protecting the colony. "I want to know the truth," Patrick said loudly, his voice carrying across the plaza. "Why are you really here? What do you want from us? Aliens don't help other species without expecting something in return." Aurora did not become angry or defensive. Instead, she turned to face Patrick directly, her silver eyes meeting his brown ones without fear or hesitation. "You are right to question me," she said calmly. "It is good that you are cautious. Caution keeps a species alive, but you are wrong about my motivations. I do not expect payment or reward. I am here because I believe in your species. I am here because I have watched humans for many years, and I have seen something in you that is rare in this galaxy." She gestured to the gathered crowd as she spoke. "I have lived for more than 3,000 of your years, Patrick. In that time, I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have seen species achieve great power and then destroy themselves through greed and cruelty. But humans are different. You are young, yes, but your youth is not a weakness. It is a strength. You still believe that life has meaning. You still believe that individuals matter. You still believe that one person can make a difference in the world." Patrick listened, and something in his expression changed. He was not fully convinced, but he was beginning to understand. "The oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy have forgotten these things," Aurora continued. "They have become cold and calculating. They believe that might makes right and that the universe cares nothing for individuals. But I remember when my people believed as you do. I remember when we fought for others not because it benefited us, but because it was the right thing to do. I am here to protect that belief in humanity, because I fear that if it dies out, then everything worth saving in this galaxy will die as well." She turned away from Patrick and looked toward the horizon where the twin suns were beginning to set. "You will one day be the greatest civilization in this galaxy, but only if you never forget what makes you special now. Never forget that you fight not just for survival, but for meaning. Never forget that you value the individual and the unique. Never forget that compassion and hope are not weaknesses, but the greatest strengths of all." The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then Claire began to clap her hands together. Others joined in, creating a wave of sound that echoed across the plaza. Patrick watched this and made a decision. He walked forward and extended his hand to Aurora. "I was wrong to question you," he said, "but I'm glad you are here, and I am grateful that you believe in us." Aurora shook his hand, and a new understanding was born between them. Patrick would become one of her most dedicated allies. A human who understood that protecting humanity meant protecting its ideals as well as its people. That night, as Aurora sat on the roof of the colony's tallest building with Ember and Storm beside her, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the countless years she had spent alone, watching the galaxy from a distance, waiting for a moment when she might make a difference. And now that moment had come. She had found people worth fighting for, and they had found someone worth believing in. Storm made a soft chirping sound and rested his massive head against her shoulder. Aurora reached up and ran her fingers along his scales, feeling the warmth and life flowing through him. "Yes, my friend," she whispered. "This is home now. This is where we belong." Below them, the colony was settling into its night cycle. Lights were dimming in the residential areas, and the people were finding rest and safety for the first time in a long while. They did not know that above them, an ancient elf and 2 great dragons were watching over them. They did not know that one person had decided their lives were worth saving. But in the coming days and months they would learn, and their understanding of the universe and their place in it would be changed forever. 6 months after the Cardish attack, New Haven had transformed into something new and remarkable. The colony was no longer just a human settlement struggling to survive at the edge of known space. It had become a center of learning and discovery. Scientists from across the Human Federation had arrived to study the presence of Aurora and her dragons. Teachers came to learn about magic and ancient technology. Artists came to be inspired by the incredible things they were seeing. Aurora had established a school in the center of the colony. It was a simple building made of stone and glass, designed to allow natural light to flow through every room. But inside, things of incredible importance were happening. Aurora was teaching the brightest human minds about the fundamentals of magic, about the connection between consciousness and physical reality. about the ancient sciences that had been lost when most civilizations had turned away from understanding the deeper nature of existence. Among her students was a young woman named Sophie. She was 20 years old and had been working as an engineer in the colony's power systems when Aurora had invited her to join the school. Sophie possessed an unusual gift. She could sense magical energy in ways that most humans could not. Aurora had recognized this gift immediately and had taken Sophie under her personal care as a student and apprentice. Today, Sophie was attempting something that no human had ever done before. She was trying to channel magical energy directly from the world around her and focus it into a crystal that Aurora had given her. The crystal was ancient, carved from stone found on Aurora's homeworld of Aelendor. It was perfectly clear and smooth, with edges that seemed to catch and hold light in impossible ways. Sophie sat in a cross-legged position in the center of the training room, the crystal resting in the palm of her hand. Sweat beaded on her forehead from the concentration. Her eyes were squeezed shut and her whole body was trembling with effort. "Focus, Sophie," Aurora said gently from where she stood nearby. "Do not force the energy. Let it flow through you like water flowing through a river. You are not the source of the magic. You are the channel through which it moves." Sophie took a deep breath and relaxed her body. She stopped trying so hard and instead simply opened her mind to the energy around her. And then something shifted. She felt it. It was like opening her eyes after being in darkness for her entire life. Energy flowed through her, around her, and into the crystal. The stone began to glow with soft blue light. When Sophie opened her actual eyes, she saw the crystal blazing with power in her palm. She gasped with wonder and excitement. The light flickered and died, but Sophie did not care. She had done it. She had channeled magic. "I did it," she whispered. "I actually did it." Aurora smiled and placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "You did more than that, Sophie. You proved something important. You proved that magic is not something that belongs only to ancient species. It is available to any consciousness brave enough to reach out and grasp it. Your species has the potential to become as powerful as any in this galaxy." But before Sophie could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the colony. Red lights flashed in every corridor and public space. Aurora immediately recognized the sound. It was a warship detection alert. They moved quickly to the command center where Claire was already coordinating with the colony's defense personnel. On the central viewing screen, they could see a massive ship emerging from the jump gate that connected New Haven to the rest of the galaxy. But this ship was different from the Cardish vessels. It was sleek and elegant, painted in shades of silver and blue. The insignia on its hull identified it as belonging to the Viridian Collective, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Claire's face was pale as she looked at Aurora. "They have sent an ambassador and a diplomatic delegation. They want to speak with you directly. They said it is very important." Aurora nodded and turned to look at the approaching vessel. She had expected this. It was only a matter of time before the older civilizations noticed what was happening on New Haven. The emergence of a member of the ancient elf race after thousands of years of isolation would not go unnoticed. "Bring them here," Aurora said calmly. "I will meet with them." The Viridian ambassador was a tall creature with skin that shimmered between purple and silver. Her name was Counselor Thane, and she had served as a diplomat for the Viridian Collective for more than 500 years. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding respect, and her four eyes studied Aurora carefully as she entered the meeting chamber. "Counselor Thane," Aurora said, bowing respectfully. "It has been a long time since I have seen the Viridian Collective represented among the frontier worlds. To what do I owe the honor of your visit?" Thane settled herself into a chair across from Aurora. Her voice was calm but carried an undertone of concern. "I come on behalf of the Galactic Council, Aurora. The Council is curious about your recent activities. An ancient race emerging from hiding to defend a young species is not something that happens without significance. We wish to understand your intentions. Why have you involved yourself in human affairs? What is it that you hope to accomplish?" Aurora had known this question was coming. She had prepared her answer carefully. "The humans are a species worthy of protection and investment, Counselor. They possess qualities that most older civilizations have lost. They are curious, adaptable, and most importantly, they are not driven solely by self-interest. They are capable of genuine compassion for others, even when it offers them no benefit." Thane's four eyes narrowed. That is not an answer that will satisfy the Council. Many species possess those qualities at some point in their development. The question is whether those qualities will remain as humans gain more power and influence. Aurora leaned forward slightly. That is the question worth asking, Counselor. That is the question that will determine the future of this galaxy. Will humanity lose what makes them special as they grow? Or will they teach all of us to remember what we have forgotten? Thane was quiet for a long moment. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the colony below. She could see the dragons resting in the central plaza, allowing human children to climb on their backs and run their fingers across their scales. The Council will be watching you closely, Thane said finally. And they will be watching humanity as well. If what you say is true, if humans can truly teach us to remember what we have lost, then your presence here is the most important thing that has happened to this galaxy in thousands of years. But if you are wrong, if humans follow the same path that all young species follow, then we will have a problem. She turned back to face Aurora directly. I am not your enemy, Aurora, but I am bound to serve the Council, and the Council is afraid. Fear is a powerful force. Do not let the Council's fear drive them to take action against you or against humanity. After Thane departed, Aurora found herself in deep thought. She walked through the colony until she reached the medical center where Lucy, the child she had healed 6 months ago, was now learning to work as a junior medic. The girl had recovered completely from her injuries, and more than that, she had become one of the first humans to show genuine interest in healing magic. Aurora sat beside Lucy and watched her work with an elderly human patient. Lucy's hands glowed with soft green light as she eased the man's pain from arthritis. The old man smiled with gratitude, and Lucy smiled back with the pure joy of knowing she had helped someone. This was what Aurora fought for. This was what mattered, not politics or power or the fears of ancient civilizations. It was the moment when one being could reduce another being's suffering through nothing but intention and compassion. It was the moment when an individual made a choice to see another individual as worthy of care. Lucy noticed Aurora watching and came over to sit beside her. Are you all right? Lucy asked with the directness that only humans seem to possess. You look sad. Aurora placed an arm around the girl. I'm not sad, Lucy, I am hopeful. But hope and sadness are not always opposites. Sometimes they are the same feeling looked at from different angles. Lucy considered this seriously, as if it was the most important thing anyone had ever said to her. Well, I am happy you are here, Lucy said simply. And I think the world is better because you saved us, no matter what any council says. Aurora pulled Lucy closer and rested her head against the girl's shoulder. Perhaps the young could see truths that the old had forgotten. Perhaps that was the real gift that humanity had to offer to a weary and cynical galaxy. 1 year after the Kardish attack, the galaxy was being forced to reckon with the reality of Aurora's presence and her choice to support humanity. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions to discuss the implications. Trade routes were being rerouted to pass through human space. Scientific delegations were requesting to study with Aurora and learn her teachings. More remarkably, young members of other species were beginning to arrive on New Haven, wanting to study the new magic that Aurora was sharing with the galaxy. The colony had grown from a few thousand humans to a bustling hub of thousands of beings from dozens of different species. New buildings were constructed to accommodate the influx of visitors and new residents. The planetary government of New Haven became one of the most important political centers in the entire galaxy. And at the heart of it all was Aurora, working tirelessly to teach, to heal, and to demonstrate that cooperation between different species was not only possible, but could lead to extraordinary growth and advancement. Patrick, the human soldier who had initially doubted Aurora, had become her primary military advisor. He had worked with her to create a defense system that protected New Haven, not through violence but through a combination of technology and magic. No enemy had dared to attack since the Kardish retreat, and most seemed to understand that any aggression would be met with overwhelming force. The very presence of Aurora and her dragons was enough to deter most hostile actions, but not everyone welcomed this new era. Deep in the territories controlled by the Kardish collective, there was anger and resentment. The Kardish saw in Aurora's actions a threat not just to their military superiority, but to the entire power structure of the galaxy. If an ancient race chose to emerge from hiding and protect younger species, If magic and ancient knowledge began to spread, then the Kardish dominance might be challenged. And the Kardish did not take challenges lightly. It was this resentment that led to the assassination attempt on Aurora's life. She discovered it not through any external warning but through Storm, her younger dragon. The creature had felt a disturbance in the air, a wrongness that his sensitive magical senses could detect. Storm alerted. Aurora, just moments before a projectile designed to fragment her molecular structure at the cellular level, would have struck her. Aurora was in her private quarters when Storm burst through the reinforced door, his scales crackling with electrical energy. The dragon's distress was immediate and unmistakable. Someone was attempting to kill her. Someone had sent an agent to New Haven with orders to commit murder. She immediately reported the incident to Claire and Patrick. They moved quickly to secure the colony and identify the would-be assassin. It did not take long to find the culprit. A Kardish operative had infiltrated the colony by disguising themselves as a maintenance worker. The operative was arrested and placed in custody, and under questioning, they revealed that the assassination attempt was sanctioned by the highest levels of Kardish leadership. The revelation sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The peaceful coexistence that had been forming was suddenly threatened by the reality that not all species were willing to accept change. The Galactic Council called an emergency assembly. Representatives from all the major powers gathered to discuss what should be done about the Kardish threat. Aurora stood before the council, her silver hair perfectly groomed, her expression calm despite the gravity of the situation. She did not ask for war. She did not demand retribution. Instead, she made an offer that surprised everyone. The Kardish are not evil by nature, she said to the assembled delegates. They are a species that has been taught to value dominance above all other things. But even Kardish have the capacity for growth and change. I propose that instead of war, we offer them something different. We offer them the opportunity to join us in building a new kind of galaxy. We offer them peace in exchange for laying down their weapons and embracing the principles of cooperation that we have been developing here on New Haven. A human delegate named Rebecca spoke up. That is a beautiful sentiment, Aurora. But the Kardish have proven they are not interested in peace. They have demonstrated their willingness to murder in order to protect their power. How can we trust them? Aurora turned to look directly at Rebecca. We cannot trust them based on their past actions alone. But we can offer them a choice. We can show them that there is an alternative to endless warfare and competition. We can demonstrate that cooperation brings more strength than dominance ever could. Some will reject this offer, but I believe that there are Kardish who are tired of war, just as there are members of every species who desire peace. The council was divided on Aurora's proposal. Some wanted to go to war with the Kardish immediately. Others agreed with Aurora's approach but doubted its effectiveness. Ultimately, a compromise was reached. Aurora would lead a diplomatic mission to the Kardish territories. She would attempt to negotiate peace. If those negotiations failed, then the council would authorize military action. Aurora departed New Haven with Ember and Storm, along with a small human delegation that included Claire and Sophie. The journey to the Kardish homeworld took several weeks through the carefully mapped trade routes that connected the various regions of the galaxy. The Kardish homeworld was nothing like New Haven. It was a place of stark beauty and harsh environments. The landscape was dominated by massive rock formations and deep canyons. The sky was perpetually dark, filtered through dense atmospheric clouds. When Aurora and her delegation arrived at the landing platform, they were immediately surrounded by Kardish soldiers, their weapons trained on the visitors. A Kardish leader stepped forward. He was taller than most of his kind, with scarred skin that told stories of countless battles. His name was General Cray, and he was the military commander of the entire Kardish collective. "Why have you come here, elf?" Cray demanded, his voice like grinding stone. "Have you come to boast about your victory? Have you come to threaten us further?" Aurora bowed respectfully. A gesture she had learned meant respect and peaceful intent across multiple cultures. "I have come to offer you something valuable, General. I have come to offer you a future that is not defined by endless warfare and the constant struggle for dominance. I have come to offer you the opportunity to join the new way of thinking that is spreading across the galaxy." General Cray laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the landing platform. "You offer us nothing, elf. You offer us surrender dressed up as peace. The Kardish will never accept such a proposal. Aurora stepped forward and the soldiers tensed, ready to strike. But she held up her hand, a gesture of peace, and continued to walk toward General Cray until she was standing directly before him. "I have lost count of how many wars I have witnessed," she said quietly, so that only Cray could hear her. "I have watched species that were united become divided. I have watched civilizations that were proud be reduced to dust and memory. I have watched young and old alike die for causes that did not truly matter, for pride and honor and the need to be superior to others. And I have asked myself many times why intelligent beings continue to make the same choices generation after generation." She looked directly into Cray's eyes. "But I met humans, General. A young species with no history of great power or dominance. A species that had been judged and found wanting by most of the galaxy. And I discovered that they knew something that all of us had forgotten. They knew that life could mean something other than conquest. They knew that strength could come from compassion as well as from weapons. They knew that honor could be found in protecting others rather than in destroying them." General Cray was silent for a long time. His expression remained hard, but something in his eyes seemed to shift, as if he was hearing something that resonated with a part of himself he thought had died long ago. "I cannot simply change the beliefs of an entire species. Elf, the Kardish way has been our way for thousands of years." Aurora nodded. "I understand, but I do not ask you to change everything. I ask only that you consider that there might be another way. I ask that you send a delegation to New Haven. Let them see what we have built. Let them see that multiple species can live together in peace. And then, if after seeing this you still choose war, I will not stop you. But I believe that once you see what is possible, some of your people will want to be part of it." It was against all of his instincts and training, but General Cray found himself agreeing. He sent a delegation of Kardish scientists and young military officers to New Haven to observe what Aurora had built there. When those delegations returned to the Kardish homeworld weeks later, they brought stories that spread like fire through Kardish society. They spoke of cities where different species worked side by side. They spoke of schools where ancient knowledge was being shared. They spoke of dragons that could speak and think and choose compassion over violence. Most importantly, they spoke of humans, young and fragile humans, who had been given a chance and were proving themselves to be worthy of respect and honor. Within months, the Kardish began to change their policies. They opened their borders to trade. They stopped their aggressive expansion. Young Kardish began arriving on New Haven to study and learn. The transformation was not complete, and there were still those among the Kardish who resisted change. 3 years had passed since Aurora first arrived at New Haven. The colony had transformed into something that no one could have predicted. It was no longer simply a human settlement or even a multicultural outpost. It had become the symbolic heart of a new age in galactic civilization. The ancient libraries of the elf civilization had been opened, their contents made available to all who sought knowledge. Technologies that had been lost for thousands of years were being rediscovered and shared. Sophie, the young human woman, who had been Aurora's first student in the magical arts, had become something remarkable. She was now a master of magical theory, recognized across the galaxy as one of the foremost experts in understanding the connection between consciousness and the physical universe. She had trained hundreds of humans and members of other species in the fundamentals of magic. More than that, she had made a discovery that would change everything. Sophie had determined that magic was not something that belonged only to ancient or inherently gifted species. Instead, magic was a fundamental force of the universe that could be accessed and controlled by any consciousness with the proper training and discipline. This discovery meant that humans who had no natural magical heritage could become just as powerful as the oldest species in the galaxy, given time and dedication. Aurora stood with Sophie in the Great Library, a vast structure that had been built to house the knowledge that was being shared and preserved. The walls rose hundreds of feet into the air, lined with scrolls and data crystals and books written in languages from 1,000 different worlds. Sophie was working on her greatest project yet, a comprehensive textbook on magical theory that could be understood by any intelligent being, regardless of their species or background. "This is remarkable work, Sophie," Aurora said, reading through the pages that Sophie had prepared. "You have managed to take concepts that have been understood only by elves for millennia and express them in ways that anyone can comprehend. You have created a bridge between the ancient and the new. Sophie smiled with satisfaction. That is exactly what I wanted to do. If humanity is going to have a place among the great civilizations of the galaxy, we cannot just be recipients of knowledge. We need to be creators of knowledge. We need to contribute something unique and valuable. At that very moment, alarms began to sound throughout New Haven. But these were not alarms of attack. These were alarms of discovery. Scientists working in the deep space observatories had detected something unprecedented. A signal was coming from beyond the known galaxy. It was an artificial signal, which meant only one thing. Somewhere out in the vast unknown regions of space, there was intelligent life reaching out to make contact. Aurora felt her heart quicken. She had lived for thousands of years, and she had thought she had seen everything that the galaxy had to offer. But this was something genuinely new. This was the first contact with a civilization from outside the known galaxy. This was a moment that would define the future of all galactic civilization. She made her way quickly to the command center with Sophie and Ember and Storm following close behind. Claire was already there, coordinating with scientists and military personnel. The signal was becoming clearer. It appeared to be a greeting of some kind, spoken in a basic mathematical language that transcended individual species and their specific communication methods. "We need to respond," Claire said as soon as she saw Aurora enter. "We need to let them know that we are here and that we are willing to communicate." Aurora placed her hand on Claire's shoulder. "Yes, but we must be careful. A civilization advanced. Enough to reach across the space between galaxies is almost certainly far more advanced than we are. We must approach this with humility and wisdom." The decision was made to craft a response that would represent not just humanity or New Haven, but all of the diverse species and civilizations that had gathered on this world. The message would explain who they were, where they came from, and what they believed. It would be an invitation for dialogue and peaceful exchange. The response was sent outward into the darkness of space, traveling at the speed of light toward the source of the original signal. Everyone knew that it would take months or even years for an answer to return. But the very act of reaching out had changed something fundamental. The galaxy was no longer isolated. There were other civilizations out there, older and possibly wiser. The age of universal isolation had come to an end. While the galaxy waited for a response, Aurora began to feel a weight that she had not experienced in a very long time. She was tired. Not physically tired, but spiritually tired. She had spent 3 years working constantly to build something new, to teach, to heal, to bridge divides between species. She had poured so much of herself into this work that she could feel something essential draining away. One evening, she walked alone to the highest point in New Haven, a mountain that overlooked the entire settlement. Ember and Storm remained behind, sensing that their companion needed solitude. Aurora sat on the peak and looked out at the city below. Lights twinkled like stars brought down to earth. She could see the library glowing softly in the distance, and the schools, and the hospitals, and the places where beings of 100 different species lived and worked and learned together. She had done this. Her choice to believe in humanity had led to all of this. But she found herself wondering if she had done it for the right reasons. Had she acted out of genuine compassion, or had she acted out of a desire to change the galaxy, according to her own vision of what it should be? A voice broke her reverie. It was Ember, who had followed Aurora despite the elf's intention to be alone. The dragon made a soft sound and rested her enormous head in Aurora's lap. The gesture was comforting in its simplicity. "You wonder if you have done the right thing," Ember said in the ancient language that Aurora had taught the dragon centuries ago. "You question whether you should have taken action at all." Aurora ran her fingers along Ember's scales. "How do you know what I'm thinking?" "Because I know you," the dragon replied. "I have known you for longer than any other being has known you. I have watched you carry the weight of your choices for 1,000 years. But I have also watched you save countless lives. I have watched you teach beings to believe in each other when they had given up believing. Yes, you have changed the galaxy, but perhaps the galaxy needed to be changed. Aurora leaned against the dragon's warm body and allowed herself to cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release, of letting go of the burden of perfection that she had been carrying. "I am afraid," she admitted to her oldest friend. "I am afraid that I have created something beautiful that will not last. I am afraid that once I am gone, the galaxy will revert to what it was before. I am afraid that nothing I have done truly matters." Ember made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. "If nothing you have done matters, then why are humans studying magic? Why are Kardish working alongside Viridians? Why are species that were enemies now living as friends? You have changed the fundamental nature of the galaxy, Aurora. You have changed what beings believe is possible. That change cannot be undone, even when you are no longer here to maintain it." Aurora looked up at her dragon companion with new understanding. She realized that Ember was right. Change was not something that came from a single being maintaining it through force of will. Change was something that spread, that took root, that grew beyond the original catalyst. She had not just changed the galaxy, she had created the conditions for the galaxy to change itself. As if in response to this realization, the communication center sent out an urgent message. The response from the alien civilization had arrived. But it was not what anyone had expected. Instead of words, the signal contained something else. It contained music. Complex, beautiful music that seemed to touch something deep in the consciousness of every being who heard it. It was a song that spoke of wonder and discovery and the desire to know more about others. Aurora listened to this music and she understood. The beings who had sent it were different from anything she had encountered before. They were not a threat. They were an invitation. An invitation to grow further, to learn more, to continue the process of becoming that she had started. She stood and looked out once more at the city below. Somewhere down there, humans and dragons and beings from 100 worlds were hearing the same music. They were all listening to the same message. They were all hearing the call to expand their understanding of what was possible. The age of isolation was truly over. And a new age, an age of true galactic unity, was beginning to dawn. 5 years had passed since the first signal from beyond the known galaxy had arrived. New Haven had grown into one of the most important worlds in all of known and newly contacted space. The alien civilization, which called themselves the Luminants, had established a trading post on the edge of the New Haven system. The Luminants were beings of pure energy that could take physical form when necessary. They were billions of years old and had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations across multiple galaxies. But despite their age and knowledge, the Luminants had chosen to approach humanity and the other species of this galaxy with humility. They came not as conquerors or judges, but as seekers of understanding. The contact with the Luminants had accelerated the progress of civilization across the known galaxy in ways that had seemed impossible just years before. Aurora stood in the Grand Council Chamber of New Haven on the day that humanity was formally recognized as a full member of the Galactic Coalition. The vote had been unanimous. Humanity, once considered too young and unreliable to warrant serious consideration, was now seen as a species with extraordinary potential and unique gifts to offer. Claire, who had been elected as the representative of humanity to the Grand Council, stood to deliver humanity's acceptance address. She looked toward Aurora and smiled with gratitude and pride. 5 years ago, a stranger came to our world. She was an elf from a civilization most of us did not know existed. She was different from us in appearance and in background. She had lived for thousands of years while we measured our existence in decades, and yet she saw in us something worth saving. She saw potential where others saw only weakness. She saw strength where others saw only youth. Claire's voice grew stronger as she continued. Because one being chose to believe in our species, everything changed. Our people have proven that we can learn quickly and adapt easily. We have shown that we can contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. We have demonstrated that age and experience are valuable, but so are passion and new perspectives. We are honored to join this coalition, and we pledge to use our gifts to make the galaxy a better place for all beings. The council chamber erupted in applause and celebration. Species from across the galaxy, who had never believed in humanity, were now voting for human representation in the highest governing body in galactic civilization. Aurora watched this happen and she felt something shift inside her. The work was complete. The process she had begun had taken on a life of its own. Humanity no longer needed her to believe in them. They believed in themselves now. That evening, Aurora walked through the colony with Storm and Ember at her sides. The city had grown so much that she sometimes had trouble recognizing it. Where there had once been simple structures and open spaces, there were now soaring towers and complex interconnected buildings. The population had grown from thousands to millions. But despite the growth, New Haven had maintained something essential. It had maintained the spirit of wonder and cooperation that had been present from the beginning. She made her way to the school where Sophie taught. The young woman was now 50 years old, though she appeared to be only in her late 20s thanks to the life extension treatments that had become available through the Luminant exchange. Sophie was currently teaching a class on advanced magical theory to a group of students that included humans, Luminants, Kardish, and members of a dozen other species. When Sophie saw Aurora enter the classroom, she paused in her teaching and greeted her mentor warmly. "Everyone, this is Aurora," Sophie said to her students. "She is the one who first believed that this kind of education was possible for beings like us. She is the one who decided that ancient knowledge should be shared rather than hoarded." The students turned to look at Aurora with awe and respect. But Aurora found herself uncomfortable with the attention. She had never sought to be famous or celebrated. She had simply made choices that seemed right at the time. After the class ended, Aurora and Sophie walked together through the library district. Sophie showed her former teacher all of the new sections that had been added. There were now entire wings dedicated to human contributions to galactic knowledge. Humans had created new theories about the nature of reality. They had invented new technologies. They had produced art and music that had inspired beings across the galaxy. "Do you see what I mean now?" Sophie asked. "When you gave us a chance, you did not just help us survive. You gave us the opportunity to become something more. You gave us the opportunity to matter." Aurora stopped walking and turned to look at Sophie directly. "I want to tell you something important. The change that happened in this galaxy did not come from me. It came from you. It came from humans like you who were willing to learn and willing to grow. It came from other species who were willing to consider that there might be a better way to live. I was simply a catalyst. I simply opened a door. But you are the ones who walked through it and made it real." Sophie reached out and took Aurora's hand. "Will you stay here forever?" Aurora was quiet for a long moment before answering. "No, I think I will not. I have spent 5 years here, and I have given all that I can give. But more importantly, I believe that my time here is ending, because it needs to end. If I remain, people will continue to look to me for answers and guidance. But the answers that matter now must come from within each species and each individual. They must come from choices made freely and from the heart." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded her understanding. "Where will you go?" Aurora looked up at the sky where the distant stars were beginning to shine as the sun set. "There is a young species on the far edge of the galaxy that has recently developed space travel. They are struggling, uncertain if they have a place in the larger universe. They are beginning to ask if they are worthy of standing alongside the great civilizations. I think I should go there. I think they need to hear what I learned here on New Haven. They need to know that every species has value. They need to know that their youth is not a weakness but a gift." Sophie embraced Aurora, and the ancient elf felt the warmth of human connection, the thing that had meant the most to her during her time on this world. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. "Thank you for believing in us." Aurora left New Haven on a morning when the twin suns of the colony world rose together over the horizon. Her starship had been refitted with new technology and powered by magic that Sophie and other human mages had learned to generate. Ember and Storm rested in the ship's hold, ready for whatever journey lay ahead. Before she departed, Aurora left behind a message to be shared with all the people of New Haven and broadcast across the galaxy. In it, she spoke about what she had learned from humanity, and from the contact with the Luminants, and from her time helping to build this new galactic civilization. Came to New Haven believing that I had wisdom to share. I believed that my ancient knowledge and my power could help a young species find their place in the universe. But I leave New Haven having learned that wisdom does not flow only from the old to the young. I have learned that humans possess a kind of wisdom that comes from experiencing life fully, from embracing both joy and struggle, from choosing compassion even when it is difficult. I have learned that the greatest gift any being can give to another is the gift of belief, the belief that they matter, the belief that their existence has meaning, the belief that they have something valuable to contribute. To humanity, I say this: do not forget who you are. Do not abandon the qualities that make you special in pursuit of becoming like older and more established civilizations. Hold on to your passion. Hold on to your willingness to question and explore. Hold on to your compassion and your belief that individual lives matter. These things are not weaknesses. They are the greatest strengths that any species can possess. To all species in this galaxy and beyond, I say that the future belongs to those who can learn to work together, who can see past differences and into the common bonds that unite all conscious beings. The contact with the luminance has taught us that the universe is far larger and more diverse than we ever imagined. But it has also shown us that despite our differences, we can find common ground. We can find shared values. We can create something beautiful together that none of us could have created alone. As her ship prepared to leave the New Haven system, Aurora stood on the observation deck with her dragons. Below them, the colony world gleamed in the light of its suns. Millions of beings were living and working and learning together in harmony. It was a sight that had seemed impossible just 5 years ago, and then something unexpected happened. The entire sky above New Haven seemed to fill with light, not the light of weapons or conflict, but the light of celebration. Every being on the planet, millions of them, had simultaneously lit candles, torches, and magical lights as a farewell to Aurora. It was a gesture of gratitude and respect that transcended any single species or culture. Aurora watched this display of light and felt tears streaming down her face. She understood in that moment that she had done more than simply help one species. She had shown an entire galaxy that change was possible. She had demonstrated that one being, acting with conviction and compassion, could transform not just one world, but the entire structure of galactic civilization.